Microdiscectomy surgeries are one of the most common forms of back surgery for those struggling with lower back pain and sciatica. And typically they're going to be done at the L4-5 or L5-S1 section of the lower back. But so often the advice and guidance is so very lackluster, especially in that short window of 4 to 6 weeks post-op, that it really leaves people in the lurch. A thorough explanation of what's actually happened and, quite importantly, what's not happened is really not given. And hopefully in this article today and podcast, we're going to help you guys better understand what's happened, what's not happened, how healing needs to take place, and what your role can be in these important days, weeks, and months post-operation. As across our social media channels, we too frequently get comments of people that have had these surgeries and just kind of been left to their own devices. So hopefully this will be really helpful for many of you. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK, in all of the world, fix their back pain from home and get back in shape for the long term. And today we'll hopefully give you a full understanding between what's actually happened when you have these herniated disc microdiscectomies. The most important thing to first distinguish is actually the difference between the damage and the herniation itself. And to do that, we've got a disc bulge here and we've got a disc herniation here. And the very important thing that's been operated on in your microdiscectomy is that this bit of herniated nuclear material has been removed. But that is not the problem. The problem is the fact that the annular fibers, which are the lighter colored material outside here, they have failed in their role of keeping the nuclear material in its place. So the injury, if you will, around that herniated disc is to the annular fibers. The fact that the herniated disc is bulging out into the spinal space, pressing on these little nerves, is not the main problem, although that is the main motivation to get the surgery done. So while the results of the microdiscectomy for many people are actually quite impressive in terms of eliminating aspects of their symptoms, if not entirely, it doesn't actually address the underlying injury that's there and the reality that absolutely nothing has been done to deal with that on the day that you've had the surgery. What's also important to consider is that although being in tons of pain is not actually helpful at all, a significant amount of the pain will have been there preventing you from doing things to make the problem worse. Frequently you get told people, bending forwards, the thought of lifting or carrying or twisting or getting in the car or sitting for long periods, these are all things that strike fear into those with herniated discs in many cases. And we've discussed these on other episodes of the podcast. But those are all things that increase the stress and strain on these annular fibers that are trying to hold on for dear life to prevent that disc bulge from bulging any further through. And so if we've had a particularly successful surgery, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. You come out feeling tons better. And the very things that were stopping you making the problem worse, the pain, the aggravation, the tentativeness, because you know you're going to get punished for it, have now been removed or eliminated almost entirely. And so that protective function of the pain has perhaps been all but erased. This leaves us the opportunity to potentially carry on doing some of those very things that made the problem worse in the first place and that prevented it getting better. One of the most important things that should have been discussed during or after the surgery or in that kind of consultation window is that this actually has been an opportunity for you to really help support the healing process. Remember that these annular fibers of the disc here are trying to heal every single day, and while we've had to have a bit of help from a surgical standpoint, that healing now can really be supported by the appropriate style of rehabilitation that we can do starting, I would argue, closer and closer to day one than you'd perhaps previously been guided. And actually, while some are a bit disheartened, they get told things like the disc is never going to be the same, which is true. They don't quite understand just how much better it really can be post-surgery if you do the right rehab. And we discussed this at great length, link down in the description, in the Healing a Herniated Disc podcast. Whether you've had the surgery or not, if you do the right sort of rehab in this window, we take advantage of the absence of that significant and inconvenient pain. And we really run with our rehab in the right sort of direction, conservatively, of course, to start with. We can use this as a great opportunity to rebuild, in many cases, significantly greater back health and resilience than we had even before the first injury. And if you're raising a few eyebrows at that prospect, just go and check out that particular episode of the podcast because we break it down in great detail for you, and hopefully it'll give you a bit of that positivity that maybe you've been looking for. Before we get into this particular section, I do want to say that for the vast majority of people, they're going to have a great post-op team. They're going to get fantastic advice, fantastic guidance on getting into that window after the surgery in a really positive way. But the reason these videos are here, for those of you that haven't had that. So please bear that in mind if you have been in a little bit of a rut, for example, post your surgery, that not everyone does unfortunately have these bad experiences. And so we've made the assumption that If you'd had a successful operation and successful rehabilitation, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So all too often, the guidance after surgery is don't lift anything, walk, don't sit down, and try and avoid twisting. And it's like, yeah, I understand that, but you have to live in the real world, and the patient isn't going home. You aren't going home in suspended animation or a vacuum for the next 4 to 6 weeks. You've got kids at home, you've got pets, you've got life, you've got to get dressed. You might still be going out and doing something. You're not just going to be floating in the house, just waiting for that clock to strike 6 weeks and then get on with your rehab. You're still doing things. And I think there's this real disconnect with the reality of the patient going home versus the ideal, perhaps. And we could even make the statement that actually it wouldn't be ideal if you just floated there for 4 to 6 weeks so healing can take place, because the cost of the muscle mass loss, the muscle control loss, would be too great to bear. And so simply we have to live in the real world and know that the patient is going to go home. And quite frankly, as we'll get onto in the next couple of sections, they're doing many of these things anyway. And the surgeon has knowingly been in the room perhaps while they've gotten out of the chair. Well, that's a squat, as we'll discuss in a moment. So the most important thing with your rehab is that it needs to meet you where you are. And the understanding and realization of many of these things that you are going to have done even in the hospital. The hospital might have stairs. The surgeon has discharged you and said, well, you're going to have to go down that step at the entrance to the hospital. So you're doing what we might call a step up. Well, you got out of bed to go to the bathroom. You've already done a squat and you've managed to get changed back into your day clothes. All of these movements you have done in the hospital setting with the known approval, either verbally or otherwise, of the surgical team. You haven't gone to them and said, hey, can I get dressed and actually lift my leg up to do that? Can I go to the bathroom and actually sit on the toilet seat? Can I do all of these things? And they've gone, no, you can't do those. They've tacitly, either verbally or otherwise, approved those actions. And that is a very important thing to realize. And perhaps even discuss with them when they say, don't do anything too strenuous. Because what does that even mean? So the simple fact of the matter is we need rehab, and we need rehab that is real. And what we mean by real is real to daily life. So those movements that I just discussed, a squat is emblematic of getting out of the hospital bed. A step up is emblematic of going up or down the stairs, or some kind of step that you might have in your house or on the way from the hospital back home. And the reason I use this example is because it is the reality that the surgeon and the medical staff in the hospital will have known that you are going to go through. They've sent you home to get in the car. How did we get in the car? They've already told you to do these things, but given you no guidance for doing those. And that's why we discussed in the episode on Core 5 for spine health, these kind of ideas. And the more we're talking about them, the more it really is seeming to make sense. And if you've got questions about this, always post them in the comments below. But understand, when you get in the car to go home from the surgery, when you get out of the hospital bed to go to the bathroom for the first time after the microdiscectomy, when you get dressed, you're not at all focusing 100% recording yourself, taking notes, watching tutorial videos on how to perform that movement, yet you did it anyway. Was it done with the best form? And over the next 4 to 6 weeks, let alone that, 4 to 6 hours, you're going to be doing many things in your existence in daily life. And so going home saying be careful is next to no guidance. Whereas we could conversely try to select a few exercises or movements, which might be a better phrase, to practice at home regularly, not in a strenuous manner, of course, but in a technical manner to start to improve things. And this is where these real to life exercises come in, the squat, the hip hinge, and the step up. They are movements that are emblematic of things that you're already doing immediately post-op. Now, in performing these exercises with instruction, we should not be moving our spine, and therefore we should not be putting undue or inappropriate strain on the very tissues that are still trying to heal and recover. And therefore we are making technical improvement in these exercises to build control and protection. And you can do this relatively quickly. It's mostly technical improvement in terms of like learning to write or learning to play the piano. It's skill. It's not strenuous exercise creating physical adaptations. It's just you learning to recruit the muscles in the right way so that you can provide protection for the spine, something that often, if not nearly always, in those that have been struggling with herniated discs for a long period of time is sorely lacking. And we could make the statement that's one of the reasons that we ended up opting for the surgery in this particular case. But by learning this stability in these movements, not only are we gaining confidence in the rehab environment, but those movements, as we said so many times, are representative of the many movements we do every day. And so there are spillover benefits. You should be, obviously this is an active process, right? If you don't do this, then it's not going to happen. But you should be starting to think about how you squat, how you get in and out of chairs, how you go up the stairs, how you do all these things every day by maintaining midsection stability to protect that section of the lower back. Hopefully you're already thinking, the simple reality is, actually, if you had to take your day, the 16 hours that you might be awake, the time when you're doing this work, recording yourself, studying, looking at videos of yourself and others doing these movements so you get it right, that's probably the safest part of your entire day. When the doorbell rings and you get up to go and answer it, you've done a squat and you've perhaps rushed to the door because it's something that you need. You've maybe taken that parcel off someone, or maybe you've had to pick it up and move it somehow. When you're preparing dinner, when you're going to the bathroom, the rehab time is the only time where you're focusing 100% on what you're doing and how you're doing it with your spine in mind. And so this is such an important concept to discuss because it helps give you confidence rather than fear from rehabilitation. And that's not to make you fearful of those other things at all, but it's also to put things into perspective. Too often people are so very worried about, quite frankly, doing their rehabilitation, but not worried about straining on the toilet. And I use that example because everyone's going to go through it. And some of you guys are going to be on certain medications, which make things like constipation and other digestive issues start to crop up. And that's way more strain than carefully doing a little squat like so with a neutral spine. Hopefully it's getting you thinking. And these are, of course, very important concepts to perhaps even discuss, as we mentioned in the back surgery podcast, link down below. Discuss actually with your surgeon, ideally before the surgery itself. Say, hey, look, doc, you're going to send me home. I'm going to have to get out of the chair in the office or the hospital. Is it worthwhile I perhaps practice a little bit of that? So I'm not doing it in a way that perhaps could be negligent or negative towards the recovery of my back after this surgery, because you want to optimize success. They want to optimize success. And thinking about it like this might just help you do that. Ultimately, whether you're doing your rehab work or you're not, being vigilant for the kinds of mistakes that put the back under strain in the minutes, hours, days, and weeks after surgery is going to be vital to increase the likelihood of success. And with each passing minute, hour, day, and week, you're going to find that more and more healing around this annulus and the segment itself can take place without aggravations and flare-ups. And as that happens, you build confidence, but you also build structure in your spine. And you continue these very, very simplistic concepts that we've discussed in this particular episode of the podcast. And you build on those with increased complexity, increased difficulty, increased intensity at the right pace as you go through that recovery process. But with each passing week, you're getting more and more technical and technically sound with these very same movements, which are so pervasive into everything that you're doing. And as long as you remain vigilant, as long as you apply the good technique that you're learning when you're spending time focusing on the exercises to the things that you're doing every day and become more aware of trying to maintain a neutral spine, you're going to do great. Now, naturally, as I get towards the end of this video, concepts of the bending the spine and twisting the spine and all that kind of stuff come up. But shouldn't the spine bend? Of course it should. We get questions all the time about this. But there's a time and a place for everything. And if you're interested in the concept of when you might start to consider incorporating bending or particularly flexion, forward bending, back into your rehabilitation protocols, definitely check out the link down in the description for the When to Add in Flexion podcast, where we discuss this at great length. And hopefully that'll really help you have a firm understanding of how you should move forwards from here. But remember, we have tons of free and helpful resources on both the website and the YouTube channel. We've got the masterclass, which is an 80-minute lengthy video that discusses all of these concepts, as well as gives you some rehab pointers as well in about 50 minutes worth of the demo stuff at the end of that particular video. And of course, for those of you that just want a little bit more help, a little bit more support, like many of our members, check out the Back in Shape program membership and look at that, because the structure there alongside the support for many of you can actually be just the right thing to make you leverage a microdiscectomy in your lower lumbar spine, followed up with proper rehab as a means to improve your back health and massively reduce the risk of re-injury for the long term. If you made it this far for the video, thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. Consider sharing this with someone else who could benefit, whether they've had a surgery or not. To be honest, hearing this video before you've had the surgery would have been even better. So consider sharing it with them. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.